Thank you for your interest in the Bulldog Blueprint Community Engagement Program. The intent of this video is to prepare attendees prior to virtual session of CES number 4 on October 21st, 2021. This information is also here as a reference for those that are attending in-person sessions and just need a refresher, or anyone that cannot attend due to schedule. If you've not done so yet, I would recommend also watching the videos that were prepared for CES number 1, 2, and 3. While we will briefly review previous sessions at the in-person sessions, and some in this video, we will not cover all of our previous work. These videos can be found on the Bulldog Blueprint website, www.bulldogblueprint.com. My name is Damian Schlitt with BLDD Architects and a member of the Mahomet-Seymour community. I will be working hand in hand with the Bulldog Blueprint Committee through our master planning program. Tonight, we're going to continue our efforts to develop our solutions for a final evaluation during our next meetings. This meeting is a continuation of our development and evaluation of our scenarios. Our informational portion will focus on two key items. The first, a reminder of what was brought us to this point in the process and how these scenarios were developed and refined to this point. I'm going to review briefly the feedback and work results from CES 1, 2, and 3 that have gotten us to this point. This will also serve as a reminder to help inform your work tonight. The second item is to clarify the question of how these scenarios solve capacity in relation to our projected enrollment through 2030, but also for estimated enrollment beyond 2030. This was a key consideration or question in our previous meetings, and we wanted to be sure we clarified it. This will then leave us with a clear understanding of our capacity scope of work and allow us to work on our work activity to focus on what additional physical needs work, or P&A, and building improvements need to be considered in a full-depth master plan solution. Now in review, during CES 1, we asked community members what surprised them and concerned them about our current facilities and other district realities. The condition of the junior high, the high costs associated, the bus barn location, and the fact that no work had happened related to capacity upgrades since 1998 were surprising. Concerns were topped by costs, but right behind that was growth of the district and class sizes, and really the issue of traffic at all of our campuses. We see these as a sign of things we need to solve in our plan. In meeting 2, our first activity, we asked for prioritization of features, both physical and functional, to solve our current needs, but also to support the delivery of education moving into the future. As a reminder, the top physical priorities by a long margin were support for current and future enrollment growth and to be deeply infused with technology. For functionality, beyond collaboration and flexibility, to support the needs outlined from our teacher survey, there were needs identified for hands-on science lab spaces, CTE and shop updates, updated PE facilities, and fine and performing arts spaces. The second part of that evening's work was to brainstorm actual facility scenarios for evaluation. The consensus top 3 scenarios were based around 3 types of new buildings: new junior high, new high school, and a new 5, 6, 7, 8. In our last meeting, we reviewed those 3 starter scenarios as well as the status quo scenario. Strengths of the scenarios related to use of existing land, retirement of the junior high, and traffic improvements. Weaknesses related to outstanding physical needs work, the idea of a 5-8 facility, and the need to acquire land or the lack of a full solution to traffic. Finally, in activity 2 at CES number 3, we asked groups to identify the scenario or scenarios that were considered DOA, as in the group could not consider them at all. Besides status quo, which showed up on almost all group activities, the only other scenario receiving votes was scenario 1, the new high school scenario. Now, as outlined before, while there were consensus selection among the top scenarios to be explored, there have been other scenarios offered up. Besides the fact that these did not have strong consensus support, I wanted to take a chance to review other factors that also were taken into consideration relative to these scenarios. These scenarios include a pre-K 1, 2, 6, 7, 8 alignment, a pre-K 5 scenario, effectively replacing Lincoln Trail, and turning Middletown Prairie into a pre-K-5 facility. Listed here are some best practice planning factors that a district of our size must be mindful of as we not only evaluate ideas, but develop the solutions to those ideas. And please note, these are considered in the current scenarios under review. Limiting the number of transitions is a critical point that aligns very well with our current grade alignments. Anything less than 2 grades per building means that during any year, 1/2 of students are new students in that facility. This is difficult for students and staff alike to create connections and an engaging learning environment. Grade level alignment is important, but also controlling for the number of students in a K-8 facility. If we were to create a 2-6 or even pre-K-5 facility, that would result in 1,500 to 1,800 elementary students in a building, or at least on one site. This is beyond manageable relative to students, but also would result in major issues for site access and traffic. The next item to consider is providing direct, safe access to dedicated fields and play areas. This means junior high fields for the middle school, proper play areas for pre-K-5. Lastly, but not least, relate to traffic, both accessing a site, but also traffic flow and circulation on that site. Our goal is for all of our scenarios to have 100% of car queue on site and not rely upon village streets and roadways for that line to form. Beyond the planning principles related to what we are planning towards, there are 2 other questions that need to be clarified. The first is the lack of a swimming pool in any of these scenarios. There are many reasons for this, the first of which is that it has not been a leading priority in your work to this point. Yes, it has come up, but it has not been a high priority item amongst the groups. Besides that, a competition natatorium with applicable locker room and support spaces is a $20 to $30 million investment. Being a low priority item from the community, it seems unlikely we would be willing to give up other high priority items or even building capacity solutions for this cost. There is then the cost to maintain the facility for the life of it, which is something the district is currently not in the position to do. Lastly, it must be made clear that the idea of a public pool and a high school competition pool are completely different items. A competition pool is cooler temperature and only accessible in off hours to the public. A public pool is warmer, outdoor, and often includes areas like kiddie pools, splash pads, etc. In summary, a pool a school district would consider building is not the same as what a community would want in a public pool. Then, there is the concern of Mahomet-Seymour High School and junior highs being in close proximity. Not only do these facilities not currently share facilities that require close access, but considering the size of our district currently and into the future, we should be planning our facilities to be self-supporting, which means that their proximity to one another has no added value and their distance does not pose functional issues. So now, with a clear background of the work to this point, we wanted to provide some further information for how our scenarios have been planned at this point. While there were other weaknesses identified from the community that related to our various scenarios, there were 2 that we felt needed to be clarified to allow development to continue. The first is related to future growth. Many groups questioned or worried that these scenarios were all temporary or didn't plan for future growth. Then there was the concern that at some buildings we were not doing enough, which leads us to tonight's work activity and the inclusion of physical needs upgrades beyond the capacity improvements presented to this point. So, relative to enrollment and capacity. As has been discussed during CES number 1, here's our historical actual enrollment. We are now showing the year 2021 as well, as that has been updated from the start of the school year. Years are along the bottom, and enrollment is on the side axis. From the 2009 dip until 2021, we've had more than a 20% increase in enrollment in our schools. So this chart was our projected enrollment through the year 2031, where we were seeing an additional 11% of growth over the next 10 years. With the updated enrollment for 2021, you can see that we are approximately 60 students above our projection for 2021-22 school year. This did lead the district to request updated figures from the demographer and actually resulted in slightly lower 2030 projections, with about 7% growth over the next 10 years. Now, before we discuss the capacity we are trying to obtain, we must define a few items. First is planned capacity. This is based around the target number of students in a class, and it varies by grade. There's also max capacity. This is the maximum number of students that are allowable in a class before the need for an additional section or class is needed. Both planned and max capacity are based in best practice, but are very much defined by the district in question. There are also other factors that impact capacity. Teacher availability is one, but also bubble classes. We currently have 2 at 7th and 9th grades. These are classes that are larger and require more capacity themselves, but should not necessarily be the basis for our planned capacity, or we could end up with excess building for our student population. There are also factors such as financial sustainability related to class size. If we get as many teachers as we want, can we afford to have only 10 kids in a class? Lastly is the availability of support spaces. While we may have classroom capacity, do we have space for all programs to support our students as a whole child? One other item I wanted to note here is the question related to the outgrowth of Middletown Prairie Elementary. Now, this facility was not planned relative to long-term district growth. This building was built to support as many students as possible with no tax increase, sales tax money only. In addition to this goal of no tax impact to build MPE and our extreme growth, we are now considering adding some capacity as part of this planning. Now, on the other side of the ledger is enrollment. Actual enrollment is a count of students recorded on October 1st. This is measurable. Then there's a projected enrollment. This is reflected in the enrollment study presented in CES1 and updated tonight. This is based on not only historical information, but also factors related to housing, birth rates, migration, and is most accurate for the next 10 years through 2030-31 school year. Lastly, there is beyond 2030 estimated enrollment. This is simply a linear growth estimate based on historical averages. Average growth of 1.1% year over year for the past 10 to 15 years. Low growth at about 0.7% and high growth of about 1.5%. So if you look at our capacity to enrollment analysis, we can see our enrollment in the solid line and our projected enrollment through 2031 in the dashed. If we add our estimated enrollment, we see a trend continuing to grow into the future, again, average 1.1% year over year, through 2050 in this chart. This lighter line is low enrollment estimate, about 0.7% year over year. While this one, high growth, 1.5% year over year. We now start to compare the planned capacity, our green line, and max capacity, the red line, relative to this enrollment trend. This shows those levels prior to MPE Phase 2 completion. Here you can see, due to the new spaces and flexibility of MPE, the max capacity grew quite a bit, but the planned capacity was still below our actual figures and well below our planned enrollment going forward. The extension of those lines, based on the planned capacity increases of the Bulldog blueprint, is shown here. While we don't want to overplan, we do want to make sure we have sufficient capacity today and into the future with flexibility to support the unknown. This chart shows that we are able to carry planned capacity, support for target class sizes, through the year 2040 if we expected average growth. If we go faster, that threshold is reached in 2038. Yet if we slow, capacity supports us through 2046. We only meet max capacity in the year 2046 if we have high growth, 1.5% year over year, past 2030. Other growth models show that threshold being met beyond the year 2050, a point at which we should likely be 10 years into our next master plan. Please note, this is not a guarantee of how we will grow past 2030, let alone past this year. However, this does show that with the information we have and the capacity we are planning to support in any Bulldog Blueprint Master Plan scenario, we will support our district's capacity needs well beyond 2030 and possibly even further into the future. So to summarize today, we are approximately 300 students beyond our planned capacity and within 300 of max capacity for the district. Much of that deficiency is at the junior high, with MPE, LTE, and Mahomet-Seymour High School right around their planned capacities respectively. We would expect to support estimated growth through the year 2040 and max capacity well beyond 2050. Max growth does push those figures to 2038 and 2046 respectively, with low growth supported well beyond 2046. Bottom line, all scenarios are planned with the capacity in mind: how's current enrollment and future projected and estimated enrollment growth. Now, before I begin to review our refined scenarios, a quick review of the full scenario layout sheet. At the top of each scenario is its title and defining description: status quo, new junior high, etc. Next, you can see the name of each campus across the top of the columns. Regardless of grade level served, we will refer to each site as it's currently known to avoid confusion. At the bottom of each column are some basic information related to the option: grade level alignment, existing and addition square footage, areas, and total square footage. Lastly, at the bottom is a legend of colors and traffic lines. These related to things from new construction or additions to retirement or demolition. Please note, each site is to scale relative to additions, renovations, etc. However, the various sites are not to scale to each other. So the high school is at a smaller scale than Lincoln Trail, mainly due to the size of the site and ability to clearly display the various sites altogether. An additional piece of information tonight that we will review are the costs related to these scenarios. These are very similar to how the plans are put together. At the far left are the scenario name, with building and grade level along the top. These are situated 2 scenarios per sheet. And you see then each column is broken into physical needs assessment work, security, technology, asbestos, and furniture work, and then the costs of those additions and renovations at each building. At the bottom, a total cost for all the work at each campus. Now, before I begin, for this video for CES number 4, I'm only going to review changes and refinements to the scenarios initially presented at CES number 3. To get a full explanation of the scenarios, please navigate to the Bulldog Blueprint website, Session CES 3. In that video, we began to introduce scenarios around the 17-minute mark, and plans begin to be shown around the 22-minute mark. Now, for status quo, this remains generally the same as that previous presentation, with the addition of turf for baseball and softball at the high school. Status quo still looks at keeping our current grade alignment at our current facilities, but simply adding the facilities needed to support capacity and moving transportation to the property south of MPE. Please note, this scenario is only still included as it will be a comparative baseline for our cost-benefit CLIO analysis that we will present in CES number 5. Based on CES number 3 feedback, we understand and we heard loud and clear that this was a very low level of support, almost none. Scenario 1 has adjustments at 3 campuses. The first is at the junior high site. Rather than simply retiring, we have included a cost for demolition of the facility. The committee felt for tonight's meeting we should include worst case so that we could include costs. If we don't have to demo that, it's a win relative to costs. Next, at Lincoln Trail, a slight adjustment to the bus lane, adding visitor parking and access directly from State Street. At the new high school site, you can see refinements to the layout related to track and football field. Also shown are refinements to paving and parking configurations to ensure we have ample car and bus queue on site. This configuration allows approximately 1,200 parking spaces, which can easily fit on the site. Scenario 2 reflects those same adjustments at the high school relative to baseball, the junior high being demolished, and Lincoln Trail's bus lane. The key refinement on this scenario is reflected in a 2-story, 6/8 facility with room for future growth if needed. This allows for junior high baseball and softball to be housed south of South Mahomet Road and for queuing of nearly 2,100 feet, which is beyond the longest queues seen or expected for our growing 6/8. This also shows approximately 500 parking spaces, about 60 more than at the current high school site. Scenario 3, similar to Scenario 2, shows adjustments at the high school, junior high, and Lincoln Trail. In this, the 5/8 facility is shown as a 2-story building as well. Currently, we are still showing play fields for baseball and softball north of South Mahomet Road. This allows us to still provide 2 car drop lines, each approximately 2,000 feet long, to ensure our traffic stays on district property. Approximately 500 spots are also shown here, with the potential for more if needed. As referenced earlier, this work is all considered to support and solve capacity needs in our facilities. This is broken into new additions, the blue column, renovations, the orange column, and site, the green column. You can then see the total for capacity solutions from about $58.5 million for the status quo to 93 for scenarios 2 and 3, up to $143 million for scenario 1 with the new high school. You can also see the total district square footage associated with each scenario. Now, as we began to discuss last meeting, the refined scenarios to this point focus on foundational items like grade alignments, locations, but most importantly, capacity. In order to create a full-depth master plan, we need to now layer on our physical needs assessment work, P&A, and any other fine details to allow us to run our CLEO analysis for CES number 5. So as you may recall from our first CES meeting, we started our work by performing a physical needs assessment. This assessment was completed through facility tours by district staff in conjunction with the design team. Our site investigation included review of all building components, ranging from electrical and lighting to heating, ventilation, and AC, even roofs and site needs. Besides a new secured entry consideration for the junior high school, all needs at the buildings related to repair or replacement of existing systems and did not or do not include any functional improvements to the facilities. For site items, work includes necessary maintenance of existing paving, fields, and tracks, but no expansion or addition of additional facilities. Now, again, when we consider all this work, as well as some various site improvements at Middletown Prairie related to paving and play areas, you can see that there are approximately $64 million in total physical needs across the district's nearly 500,000 square feet. We've adjusted these to simplify a bit. One thing you will notice, we made the transportation building standalone line, and it has been pretty consensus move to get that off of the Lincoln Trail property. We have also rounded to the nearest 10,000 for the ease of review. Now, as you will recall, when looking at these costs by facility, we can see that around 44% of our needs come from the high school site, a bit over a third at the junior high. However, when considering how much larger the high school is, you can see that the cost based on the building size tells a much different story. Here, the needs outlined at the junior high are nearly $265 a square feet. That's almost 2 times that of the high school, and over 2 times that of Lincoln Trail. When looking by component across the district, a few items pop out. Finishes related to flooring, ceilings, etc. are the highest single category at about $14.5 million. While not the tallest bar, needs such as HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and sprinklers combine to be the highest need overall for the district at approximately $23.5 million. This is approximately 37% of the overall needs. Now, in order to assist the work activity, as well as in response to requests from our first presentation of this information, we've broken these costs down by priority. Shown here are the total needs of the district. You can also find on the website this similar breakdown, along with a list of items that are included in each of the categories by building. These prioritizations are based on the urgency of the item, the impact and importance of the items to improve educational spaces, and lastly, based on the usable life remaining on that existing item. The first slice to consider are related to asbestos, ASB, classroom tech, CR tech, security tech, and furniture, fixtures, and equipment, FF&E. These are in a category of their own and relate to systems and fixture updates to our facilities. Priority A items are things we would consider urgent in the next year. Most of this $3 million is a secured entry at the junior high. Priority B are required and include items like science lab updates, lighting, and some doors and hardware items. Priority C are recommended items such as flooring or paving. And priority D are mainly full system updates such as plumbing updates or domestic water or even power distribution updates and upgrades. So if you look at those by priority, depending on where we, if you will, draw the line, we could add up to an additional $38 to $62 million in costs on top of the capacity costs presented before. These result in all-in scenarios with costs ranging from $120 million for status quo to about $132 million for scenarios 2 and 3, with scenario 1 pushing all the way up north of $180 million. If we consider the tax rate impacts of these various scales of scenarios, you can see that varies greatly, from 38-cent increase for capacity only on the status quo scenario, all the way to $2.36 for the full scenario 1. This is the basis of the work for CES number 4. It has been made clear through feedback, questions, and group work that capacity seems to be a baseline need. Tonight, we want to understand where the community feels we need to land related to physical needs work being completed, in the mindset that there is a clear and discernible cost associated with the more physical needs work that is performed. You will see this slide along with prioritized physical needs work, scenario drawings, costs on the website, and will be available for your conversations during your group work. So now, reminding ourselves of our building of our plan. Tonight's effort is to understand which portions of work related to physical need we want to add onto our capacity solutions to arrive at a final master plan scenario. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our video today. Please note our upcoming meetings with CES number 5 in November and wrapping up the process at CES number 6 in January. Look forward to seeing you at future sessions.